All right, we have Jeff Koons's Pink Panther, which is the top three images on the screen. And it is from 1988. It's made out of glazed porcelain. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Jeff Koons and all these other different pieces that you see here. And just let you guys know like all the different things that go into this because it looks really shallow and vapid and just odd that this would be considered art, but um, that's why we're going to talk about it. So the purpose of this is to celebrate the superficial, the consumption crazy suburban society of the 1980s. And that's where those colors come in it, like those teal and pinks and the blonde, and that's really an 80s thing. And so he from that, not only does he do that with the Pink Panther, he also enshrines such household objects including vacuum cleaners, inflatable balloons, topiary puppy dogs, and even porcelain pornography. The Pink Panther shows a cheesy centerfold pinups embrace of the Pink Panther cartoon figure. And it's more than 3 feet tall, so it's almost life size. And it's made from porcelain, which is really not a typical material for sculptures. The flat pastel colors recall Andy Warhol's Marilyn Monroe portraits. His work tends to embrace the kitschy, lower middle class consumer culture without really seeming to critique it. And most of his work is openly materialistic and shallow. And a little bit about Jeff Koons. He was born in 1955. He really does a lot of self publicizing and is a critical celebrant of the superficial. And so it's all kind of in a way with sly references to Marcel Duchamp. Um, and so Koons is unsettlingly bland. Pretty work invites, even welcomes critical disapproval because it embraces that kitschy, lower middle class consumer culture. Jeff Koons also does stainless steel casts on other items, and that is a definite, genuine strangeness to a cultivated art world at the time. And so it's really trying to show small town life tokens and its versions of like either masculine like conviviality like drinking accessories or feminine gentility, the emphasis on ceramic figurines. In the case of any china objects, Koons casts of fixes one's attention on almost rococo fantasies and of an old regime aristocracy persisting from generation to generation through networks of unheralded craft industries. Koons, like the pop artists, took consumer goods and transformed them through alterations in scale and materials. By making them dysfunctional, he turned them into metaphoric artifacts. He has a brilliant series of sculptures that engage in a wide range of consumer habits from liquor consumption to sports and entertainment. He's Even though he's seems like he's celebrating the 80s and the consumerism, it's he's a well-known artist who many in the art world condemn him for being a symbol of everything bad about that time. The artificiality, the consumerism, corporatism, shallowness. And from this perspective, there's not much that could be said to save him from that idea. But he's basically in the 80s, he saw like just boring everywhere, and he thought to embrace it like like he would show it off. He saw his art as equilibrium, as everything leveled. It was something people should love, that liked they loved anything, like they should like babies and sunshine and smiling. And it turned out to be, even though a strange and unpredictable idea, it actually worked out. Um, and this glazed porcelain statue of the Pink Panther belonged to this body of work that depicted the smiling, bare breasted blonde woman, scantily clad in a mink green dress. Her head is tilted back as if she's addressing the crowd of onlookers. Now, the figure is based on a 1960s B-list Hollywood star, Jane Mansfield. She's clutching a pink panther in the left hand while covering her, with her right hand, an exposed breast. And then from behind, one sees the pink panther has its head thrown over her shoulder and wears an expression of just wariness. It too is a product of a Hollywood fantasy. The movie of the same name debuted the cartoon character in 1963. The colors are antiquated, but they do harken back to that popular culture of the pre-civil rights era as a politically regressive statement, maybe of even nostalgia. And at the time of an increased feminist presence and in a still male-dominated art world, this piece could only be perceived as like a postmodern provocateur, like trying to parody male authority like he does in this work. So one of the things with this postmodern, he's like postmodernist, and he's an artist that is a critic of mass culture. And he really tries to provoke the public, and that's the mainstay of the modernist avant-garde, reaching at least as back as far as the fountain did. But whereas Duchamp eventually accrued near mythical status, the same critical reception for Koons didn't happen. In fact, he had become one of the first artists of this period to achieve a level of success that depended more on the art market than on art criticism. Only recently, a review described Koons as Duchamp with lots of ostentatious trimmings. It's easy to see why he's continued to provoke that postmodern 1980s thought that was inaugurated in a contemporary sense. And he's seen as an artist that is critical and a serious interrogator of the mass culture and media. But one of the other things that he's called is a kitschy artist, or kitsch, Kitsch. And an American art critic wants to find it as the opposite of what a truly progressive avant-garde modernism embodied. They advocated for modern art that was true to its materials, such as the gestural abstractions of the New York School artists like Jackson Pollock. And kitsch is a word of German origin. It refers to mass-produced imagery designed to please the broadest possible audience with objects of questionable taste. Think of objects and images that are popular, sentimental subject matter and style. And postmodern art attacked this influential theory of modern art. He created images in direct opposition to modernism. And so that is what we're seeing with the Pink Panther. It's challenging the distinction between the ironic appropriation of a mass cultural object and the object itself, and thereby challenging the whole critical enterprise of postmodernism itself. So there's a lot of Jeff Koons art pieces, quite a few in the Broad, and they all look, they're basically have the same similarities in that they are sculptures. Like the one on the bottom, you see Michael Jackson with he had a pet monkey named, oh God, I forgot his name, but he had a pet monkey, and now looking at that, it's really hard to see because, oh, it's Bubbles. That was the name of the monkey. But now it's really hard to see after all the controversy that's come out about Michael Jackson recently with the expose about him and the Leaving Neverland series. But the top pictures on the right are of the balloon dogs, and there's balloon dogs everywhere, and they're large. Like if you see the gold one and you stand next to it, you can see how large they are, and they look like balloons, but they're like made out of a shiny metallic piece, and it's supposed to be like they're made out of balloons. And then he does do the provocative, like the one down below that I'm not quite sure what the name of that one is. I just remember being very, I thought it looked more like Lady Gaga, but it could be someone different. Anyway, Jeff Koons is even though it is kitschy and it is very vapid and vain, and it's still like people look at it and just kind of see this postmodern art that happened during the 1980s.